You're tuned in to Track Talk on Sports Radio 810 WHB. All right. America's largest all-sports radio station presents the #1 motorsports show in the Midwest for over a decade. Track Talk, brought to you by McCarthy Chevrolet. Here are the RacinBoys, Scott Traylor and Kirk Elliott.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Track Talk on Sports Radio 810 WHB. I'm Scott Traylor, along with Kirk Elliott. We are the RacinBoys. Jed Marshall back at 810. Todd Surprise here at RacinBoys HQ. For the next hour, we're going to be bringing you some pretty good coverage about motorsports, and we're going to be talking a lot about NASCAR today. Marty Smith from ESPN.com is going to join us today. Hot off the trail of the NASCAR media tour down in North Carolina. There are a lot of things came out of this week. And maybe some things that maybe shouldn't have came out of this week. We'll get into that here in a second. Don't forget, Track Talk is brought to you by, each and every week, McCarthy Chevrolet. And just want to make a quick announcement saying that McCarthy Chevrolet has re-signed with the RacinBoys here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. So we want to thank Brian Schaefer, Carl Kramer, and all the good folks over there at McCarthy Chevrolet and McCarthy Auto Group for being such a big part of RacinBoys here on Sports Radio 810 WHB and believing in us enough to re-sign with us. We can't wait to represent McCarthy Chevrolet again for another year. So, Brian Schaefer, you are the man, and welcome aboard, Carl Kramer, for a good guy's now going to be overseeing the marketing side of McCarthy Auto Group. Had a chance to meet with him this week out at Sports Radio 810 WHB with Ted Wiley, and really good guy, a motorsports guy. Seems like he's going to be a natural fit for McCarthy and the RacinBoys. So welcome aboard, Carl Kramer. And again, don't forget to go out to McCarthy Chevrolet, just outside of Olathe at Rawhigh Road, at Santa Fe, and I-35. So check it out. Go to their website, kccars.com. Was out there today or this week on Wednesday. And let me tell you, folks, if you want a Silverado or any kind of Chevrolet, they've got them loaded up out there right now. There couldn't be a better time to buy a new car or a certified used car from McCarthy Chevrolet. So thanks so much for coming on board with us again. We appreciate it. Kirk, media week, media tour, whatever you want to call it, down in NASCAR land this week. A lot of news and rumors and things come out. But all week long, you hear everything that's going on, all the team announcements. Richard Childress talks about Harvick leaving for sure, so it's kind of been officially announced now. But I think the biggest story in this is the TMZ world that we live in right now. You know what I'm talking about? The TMZ world of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is dating Danica Patrick, who filed for a divorce last November, announces this week, the day after the NASCAR media tour is over, that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Danica Patrick are a couple, and they're going to be racing against each other for Rookie of the Year in the Sprint Cup Series. What do you think about that, Kurt?
If that's the biggest story that comes out of Charlotte after Media Week, then we've got a real problem on our hands. Danica Patrick, yeah, she's going to be a full-time in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, but until she steps up and is competitive enough to even be close to winning races and match the hype that we've heard out of this lady over the last decade now, maybe then I'll start paying attention to what her love life's all about, which really I don't care about. Yeah, we're in real trouble if that's the biggest story coming out of Media Week for NASCAR leading up to Daytona. But it has drawn a lot of attention. There's no doubt about that. She made a statement to the Associated Press, and we're all supposed to say, wow, what a story. But I'm not one of them.
You're not?
I frankly don't care. I don't care.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, you know, it's something to talk about a little bit. Here she is off the heels of not even getting divorced.
Seems like an odd pairing to me, knowing Ricky Stenhouse Jr., that he'd be the last person you'd think of that would be associated with
I will
Danica
just
Patrick.
tell you this, Kirk, that I believe this is going to help her image a little bit.
Really, and how so?
Because Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a good guy. People like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Kirk, you know, and
He'll get swaddled up in her world more than the other way around.
I'm not so sure of that.
It'll affect his image, probably not in a positive way.
No, see, I think the opposite. I think that people are going to look at him as, wow, dude, you did pretty good there. How about that, Danica? She got the bucks, too. You know, if they become a couple, he'll never have to, if they were to get married, they would never have to worry about dollars because she's filthy rich. She's got all that GoDaddy money just flowing out of her pocket. She walks down pit road, those hundreds just drop out of her fire suit pockets.
Now, my question is, does she show up at the Short Track Nationals in Little Rock next year along with Ricky?
I think she will.
And would we find her behind the wheel of a sprint car?
I don't think we will. But what I do believe is that you will see her at a short track somewhere. And again, I think that's going to give her better cred. I think her credibility is going to go up because he's more of a grassroots guy. She's been known more as a kind of a, how do you put it nicely, a little edgy. That's the best way.
Come on, say it. Spit it out.
No, I'm not
say
saying
what you're
this
thinking.
Is a family
man.
show.
You always say what you think.
Well, you know what I'm saying. She gave me that old look one time. You remember that, Kurt? You remember that one day?
Yeah, she didn't like the line of questioning you were giving her at that press conference one day out of Kansas
What was
Speedway.
the question? Oh, the question was, she just came off the win in Japan. It was a non-points race. She won it on fuel mileage. And the first race after that race in Japan, I asked her at Kansas Speedway in a public setting, press conference in the media center, Danica, wouldn't you have rather won that race with those drivers gnawing on your tail wing, racing you down to the start-finish line for the win instead of winning on fuel mileage? Is the win the same to you as if you would have won it in another form with people racing you to the win? And she paused.
She thought that was the most stupid question she'd ever been asked.
She did not say that, but she paused and looked at me for about 30 seconds before she answered it. And her exact words were, I think you're trying to set me up. Wasn't it, Kurt? Remember that? I think you're trying to set me up. I said, oh, no, I just,
She gave you a dirty look as she was saying that,
and my point is that me personally, if I win a race, I want to know that I outrun the guys, the fastest guys, to the line and held them off for the win. I don't want to know that they had to get fuel and I didn't, or I got fuel first and they came out last, or all that pit strategy. I want to know that I just outran them. Well, newsflash, that was her only win.
Yeah, she hasn't won any race since, has she?
Kirk, she has not won at the major league level of racing, period, except for that race in Japan. I'm not saying she's not a bad race car driver. She's a decent race car driver. Here's the one thing that I think Danica has going against her this year. Tony Stewart was asked if they were going to use his number 14's provisionals to get Danica into the races this year. No. She's going to have to qualify and get in on speed at every one of these races and stay in the top 35 in points to be able to do so.
Well, since we don't have the top 35
well, I guess not top 35.
locked in anymore,
right.
And it's back to the old style
Qualifying,
provisionals,
right.
that changes the situation a little bit. I think it gives her a better chance of qualifying for the races going back to the old style qualifying.
Probably does.
35
probably does. Yeah, probably does.
Especially when you get down to Daytona.
Because I look for her to be someone that qualifies about 30th a lot, 25 to 30th. And I say that because she's got really good equipment. Because if she didn't have really good equipment, I think she'd be outside the top 35 in qualifying.
Well,
like most drivers would.
You talk about Daytona, for instance. The old locked-in 35 would have made it almost impossible for her to get in if she doesn't qualify well. But now she's got chances, if she doesn't time trial well at Daytona, to come back and race her way back in on the Thursday dual qualifier races, which now are back to meaning something now. And I think this is good news for her, that they've gone back to the old style qualifying with a handful of provisionals that they give out.
Even if they were in the old format where they took the top 35, I think she would have been okay. I mean, don't you think that she could have qualified well enough out there by herself to get in?
Well, she would have
in the top 35.
She would have had the good enough equipment
she's to be in the top 35 in points is what I'm saying. She'd probably be somewhere around that 32 to 35 spot. every week, but I think she would be good enough to get in the show. Is she good enough to win a race? That's the question.
Well, you talk about Daytona and Talladega.
Those are her chances.
That gives her the best chance to win any race, I think,
right.
at the restrictor plate races. Has she learned how to draft? To see, the problem is
not really
anyone going to trust her in the draft to work with
more
her
so,
to get herself to the front to give her a chance to win a race?
I think more so, is she going to feel confident enough to get up in a pack and draft and at that intense level for 500 miles? That's the question I have. Because every time I see her, she's all right when somebody's pushing, but when she has to push is when I see her struggle the most. When she has to get in behind somebody and push them, that's where I see her having a problem.
And herein lies the next question. In light of everything that we've talked about this morning, the Danica and Ricky Stenhouse relationship. You get down to the end of the race. She's driving a Chevrolet, driving Stuart Haas' car, and she sees Tony Stewart right ahead of her, and she sees Ricky Stenhouse, her boyfriend, over there in a Ford.
She better go with Tony Stewart.
Is she going to go with Ricky Stenhouse Jr.?
No. She better not, if she knows what's good for her. The goal is to win the manufacturing championship for Chevrolet, and for Chevrolet to win the race. And regardless if she's, dare I say, betting up with the competition, she better stay with the Chevrolet camp. That would be in her best interest.
But what's going to really draw a lot of people's attentions if she is racing near Ricky Stenhouse Jr. out on the racetrack? What's that going to be like?
Well, here's
what if Danica, and she didn't mean to, gets up and bumps into Ricky Stenhouse and causes a big wreck and puts him up into the wall? How's that relationship going to be after that?
Well, and this was brought up yesterday, and so I cannot take the credit for this. But Dave Moody on Sirius Speedway yesterday, he was the first person I heard mention this, and so I got to give him the credit. But remember back in the day, Elton Sawyer, Patty Moise. People forget this isn't the first time this has happened. Those two raced against each other in the Nationwide Series for years as a couple. And I don't remember any problems between those two.
The difference is Patty Moise didn't have the kind of attention-grabbing star power that Danica Patrick has.
Right.
A lot of people hadn't even heard of Patty Moise.
She might have been a better race car driver, though.
True, but she didn't have the star power that Danica has.
Or the opportunities that Danica has. Right? She probably.
So when any little thing
not
happens,
saying that
it's
Patty
going to draw a lot of
didn't
attention.
Not to say that Patty Moise didn't get opportunities. Obviously, she got her opportunity racing at the Nationwide Series level. But that was back in the day when talent got you to the cup side more than money. Danica has made it because of her looks, her marketing strategies, and her money. Let's face it, GoDaddy money. Do you think, let me ask you this, if Danica was out there and she wasn't quite as attractive as she is, and some people don't think she's that attractive. I don't know if you think so or not. I don't know. Do you think that if she didn't have GoDaddy's money and she didn't have this marketing campaign that she's put on for the last few years through her looks, do you think somebody would just offer her a ride on her skill?
Not at NASCAR, no. I think in other forms of racing, like sports car racing, we'll see the Rolex 24 Hours this weekend. She came from a road racing background. I think she'd still be racing somewhere, but it certainly wouldn't be at the NASCAR level. It's the money and the media attention that's brought her over to this side. But she's still got to prove herself. At some point, you still have to prove you can win races if you're going to generate that kind of hype and publicity.
All right. Let's open the phone lines for everybody's thoughts. We're going to have Marty Smith on at 8:40. We'll take your phone calls at the end of this segment as well as the next segment, 913-3810-810, 913-3810-810. Let's take one call before we take a break and come back to more phone calls. Pat, you're on with the RacinBoys.
Good morning.
Hey.
When you ask talked to Marty Smith. Maybe he's heard of the winter. Has NASCAR given any thought to shrinking the starting grid down to, say, about 35 and get rid of this awful starting park? I just think that it's just minor league stuff to me, to a major sport, that they have to phony it up to get to 43 cars.
See, I don't look at it that way, Pat. I totally look at no, I don't, because I've been a team owner, not at that level, but at the ARCA level, speedway competition. I have been at that level. And, you've got to walk before you can run sometimes. And a lot of these teams, and Tommy Baldwin Racing is a perfect example. Starting Parker's first year, almost the entire season. And now he's been able to get some sponsors because of, what you do is you take your starting park money, you do 4 or 5 of those, and then you save up a little cash, and then you try to run a full race and try to get the best performance out of that race as possible. And you have to work your way up to being able to afford each one of these races or prove your worth to a sponsor. And by having 1 or 2 good runs throughout the course of maybe 7 or 8 allows you to go out and market your team as, hey, we can do this, we need some help. And see, so I don't look at these guys as starting park guys. I look at these guys as businessmen trying to make their way into the sport. Does that make any sense?
Well, I guess we can agree to disagree. I don't look at it that way. Maybe they should have to run a minimum number of laps to get the start money or something.
Okay.
But this running 1 and 2 laps and parking the thing, to me, it's just NASCAR trying to cover up a problem they have and not admit that there's not 43 quality cars to run a race. But that's just my opinion. But thank you for letting me.
Well, all right, Pat. Thanks for the call.
My opinion is nothing's going to happen to curtail the starting field from 43 to 36 or NASCAR doing away with starting parkers. It's not going to happen. They pay their entry fee to get in. If you have to require a minimum number of laps, who's to say somebody has some real mechanical problem on lap 2 and really has to pull in?
Well, you can prove that, though. You can prove that you have real mechanical problem. What people don't like is when they say, oh, we got a vibration, had to pull off.
I just don't think that's
transmission went bad. Yeah. We got to pull off. If they have to prove it, I understand that, and I'm okay with that.
I just don't think that's going anywhere with NASCAR. Would promoters like to do away with that?
I know. We're up against it.
And cut the field down? Yeah, so they wouldn't have to pay out the extra purse, but NASCAR is not going to change this starting park
and
policy.
We'll confirm this with Marty Smith. But if I'm not mistaken, and I may be, but it seems to me that there used to be a clause in the television deal that if they don't start 43 cars, there's a penalty. I don't know if that's the case or not. We'll ask Marty Smith. That'd be a good question to ask him. All right, we'll take more phone calls when we come back. We're going to be talking more about maybe Kyle Busch. He extends his contract with Joe Gibbs Racing. What do you think about that? Dale Earnhardt Jr., unsponsored for 13 races in 2013. Who would have ever thought that Dale Earnhardt Jr. would be unsponsored for that amount of races? And as we were just talking about, Bruce Smith's start has been really raising a ruckus about starting park cars. So we've got that and whatever you want to talk about at 913-381-810. More of Track Talk here on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Track Talk.
Okay, let's choose up. I'll take Jamal and Tutal. You can have Chubbs and Skippy. Let's go. My ball.
Okay. But you got skins.
Not a good negotiator? You don't have to be a good negotiator at McCarthy Chevrolet. McCarthy guarantees the lowest prices on a new Chevy or we'll pay you $10,000. We guarantee there's no need to shop anyplace else. McCarthy Chevrolet, I-35 and Santa Fe, Olathe.
Welcome back. It's Track Talk here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Marty Smith from ESPN.com is going to join us in our next segment. But right now, it's phone calls, 913-381-810, 913-381-810. Dennis, you're up with the RacinBoys. How you doing, Dennis?
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Dennis. How you been, bud?
Oh, pretty good. I wish I was with Joe this weekend.
Yeah.
Because he went down to Watermelon Speedway.
I think he's talking Watermelon Speedway. We're talking about Joe Ross, right? Right, yeah.
Yeah, down in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just...
what else you got going on, Dennis?
Oh, nothing. I'd sure like to be with him, but I just... my wife had a minor stroke, so it kind of used up my
sorry to hear
vacation.
that. Really sorry to hear that.
You know how I am. I want to be racing.
Right. What do you got? Any takes on some NASCAR stuff going on, Dennis?
I just think that I like the new format where they got to qualify to get in. So
no, I do too.
I think it'll be better. And even though you got some good drivers that, now they got to qualify. Before they didn't have to qualify.
Right. Yeah, there's something at stake now when you qualify. There's not points. There's a lot of people. And Dennis, thanks for the call. I hope your wife is doing well. I'm sorry to hear that. Tell her we're thinking of her. But thanks for the call. But there's a lot of people that have talked about should they give points for qualifying over the years.
No. I like it back at the old way. Qualifying means more now. The old provisional system works. I think back before when they went to the top 35, the economy was booming. There were a large number of sponsors in the sport that they wanted to protect. Now not everybody is sponsored, as you pointed out. Dale Earnhardt Jr. going sponsorless for a number of races. I think it works now to go back to the old system, and I hope we never go back to the top 35.
Let's be fair. From the comments of Rick Hendrick, it's not that Dale Earnhardt Jr. can't find sponsors. It's that they are being picky about the sponsors they are choosing. It has to be the right team, the right sponsor, the right fit. They're not just going to take somebody's money just to take their money. I think that's the message that Rick Hendrick.
Translation is we can afford to put Dale Jr. out there in a race car without sponsors.
Right.
Just because he doesn't have sponsors we're struggling.
No.
Rick Hendrick's a multi-time millionaire.
No, that's not. What I read, and if you go back and you take a read, you can find that he says that the sponsors are important. They have to have the right chemistry with Dale Earnhardt Jr., and that they will have some in place. They fully intend to be sponsored for those 13 races. And there's inquiries about those, and there's people that want to spend money. They're just trying to find the right chemistry. So will Dale Earnhardt Jr. be unsponsored for those 13 races? I find it highly unlikely that that's going to happen.
But even if he is, Rick Hendrick can afford for him to be sponsored.
Well, sure, Rick Hendrick can afford it. He's got more money. Did you see him down at Barrett Jackson? Did you watch any of that?
I didn't see any of it at all.
He bought a couple cars that were $1 million.
I thought I didn't even think that was real, and then that was crazy. I saw that on that auction. That was insane.
It was, wasn't it?
That guy's got that's money like
that's like real money, isn't it, Todd?
That's not even, you don't even call that monopoly money. That's another game.
That's crazy money. All right, 913-3810-810. Who do we have back there again?
Terry,
you're on with the Racing Boys.
Good morning, gentlemen. Just wanted to remind you, because I really, when it comes to the women drivers like Danica, don't have a problem with that if they're qualified. I remember watching, and I'm fairly old, Janet Guthrie in a great big old 70s era's Monte Carlo.
I remember. Absolutely.
And she was actually good enough to where Petty and Pearson, two of the best drivers ever, Pearson I think was the best, said that they didn't mind. They were comfortable riding next to her, more comfortable than they were half of the guys that were out there on the track. And I don't have any problem with it. I'm in agreement. I think Danica is more of a show than go in NASCAR, because when I watch her and I try to picture her and I think, what if she was in one of those? I don't think she could have wrestled one of those big old Monte Carlos. So.
Well, let's be fair, Terry. There's probably a few men that couldn't handle that as well. I mean, you had to be a pretty stocky guy to carry those cars around back in the day.
You're absolutely correct. I've said that today. I said, there's a lot of guys driving these things and they start moaning and groaning if their water bottle vibrates.
Or the first time they get a giant blister on their palm and have to drive 400 more miles.
That's the thing about it. And then you sit there and you think that these guys were wrestling, and you go back to Ned Jarrett, and they were wrestling 64 Galaxies in the Coca-Cola 600,
right?
And not crying about it,
right? Well, but let me be fair though with the drivers that we have today, because I've driven an ARCA car, and I can tell you from my own experience and I think I've ran one around Kansas Speedway pretty fast, qualified 11th out there one year. That was an average of 161. It's not easy to drive these cars. Contrary to belief, it's not like a Sunday drive out there. Anytime you go off in a corner, and Lloyd Collins is on our chat room right now, he had a radar gun when I qualified out there 11th at Kansas Speedway and had me going 181 miles per hour off into turn 1 in my ARCA car. Let me tell you, folks, if you've never went 180 mile an hour and turn left, you don't understand. Especially when you qualify up towards the front and you've got 30 other cars behind you running the same speed.
Years ago.
Say again?
And I remember your answer. I said, what if you had David Pearson in his prime in one of these rocket ships today, and I can't remember which one of you all answered. You said he would be 2 laps in front of everybody.
Well, there's no doubt David Pearson is one of the greatest drivers to ever strap in a race car. And I've said that for years, that I think he's the 3rd greatest driver we've ever seen. Now, some people will beat me up for that because a
lot of people say he's the greatest driver.
There are some that say he is the greatest.
Because he didn't run for every championship.
I put Petty and Earnhardt ahead because they have the championships. But if David Pearson wanted to, I think he could have won more championships.
David Pearson didn't run for every
That's
championship.
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
And
that's my point.
That's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the talent level today. And I'm not saying the guys back in those days were at this, because there's not always saying they weren't all good. I'm just saying that the quality level of today, some of the guys just are not really drivers, because the last time, as soon as these things get a little loose, and the smaller spoiler is going to show it this year, as soon as they get a little loose in the seat, some of these guys' level of abilities drop drastically. I'll let you guys go.
All right. Thanks for the call, Terry. I'm going to disagree with that just a little bit, to be fair. I think every driver that runs at the Cup level is a really good race car driver. Even Danica Patrick. I'll give her that. Is there parity from top to bottom? Probably the parity in the first 20, 25 guys. The back half, it drops off a little. But even those guys, I mean, listen, you look at guys like Dave Blaney. We know what kind of race car driver he was as a sprint car driver. He was an ass kicker. I mean, we know that he's a great racer. Guys like J.J. Yaley, yeah, he hasn't had the breaks. Well, he did get a few breaks. But he hasn't had the success at the Cup level. But we know, we've seen what he could do behind the wheel of an open-wheel sprint car or a midget. We know he's a fantastic race car driver. And he has to run back at the back because of the equipment. All these drivers are good drivers there. I got to give him that. There's just not parity between the teams. There's a separation between the have and the have-nots when it comes to the owners, and that's the biggest difference.
What brings it all together for successful race car drivers that win championships is not necessarily their natural God-given driving talent, but it's the communication aspect between he and the crew chief, the car chief, getting the right setup underneath the race car and getting the motivation of the people that work on a race car to do what they got to do to help that driver win races. The problem with Danica Patrick, and you're right, she is a talented race car driver. She's got talent
Absolutely.
to drive a race car.
Sure.
We're not disputing that at all.
But has she got the talent of Jimmy Johnson, Tony Stewart, Casey Kane, Jeff Gordon, the list of the top 10 drivers? No.
What's holding her back is her attitude, and the team members, the people that work on her race car, from the crew chief on down. I'm not sure they're as motivated to make her go fast as they would be other race car drivers.
If you're the crew chief or you're a team member on her team and you have that mindset, it should be noticed by the higher-ups, and they should all be fired if they have that belief. They should believe that they can take her to the next level, and that's why they're there. If they don't have that mindset, then they need to be fired.
I think it's hard to find the group of people that are willing to do that for her.
I think there's people that say...
I think that's hard to find those people.
I think there's people that want to work with her, that see the talent, and think that they can take that diamond in the rough and make it into something special. I believe there's people out there.
She can be a little hard to deal with when she's behind the wheel of that race car. If things don't go right, she can get on the radio and have problems.
Let's be fair. All drivers can be hard to deal with. When you're dealing with that kind of, I don't know, I don't want to call them prima donnas, but, you know, when you're dealing with that kind of confidence level, ego. There you go. You're going to have that, That's just part of it. And when drivers have that kind of ego, sometimes they're going to get a little testy with the crew. Kyle Busch is notably one of the greatest drivers that's ever strapped in a race car. He has attitude. He's yelled at every crew member. He's cussed every one of them out, and they still want to work for him.
But she doesn't have the background of winning races for crew members to be able to put up with that kind of back talk.
But there's some people that want to be able to prove that they can get her there. Put her on my shoulders. I'll carry her to the promised land. I know that there's some crew chiefs.
I'm just saying that kind of chemistry and that kind of camaraderie between the crew and the driver is pretty tough with Danica Patrick.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to hold her back even more so from even being close to winning races on different types of racetracks.
We're up against the break, Kirk, but quickly I want to talk about what we talked about with one of the callers just a moment ago, Bruton Smith. And it's not so much about what he said, Bruton Smith's comments about start and park teams, how it affects the sport, the negative stigma attached to it, how it hurts the sport, how it hurts the promoters. Bruton Smith doesn't have as much money on the line, I think, as NASCAR in this deal. Again, we're going to ask Marty Smith if this is true, if there's a guaranteed car count for these television deals. That's something I've always wanted to know. But the fact is, it's self-serving what Bruton Smith is wanting to talk about because he owns all these racetracks, and he has to pay those cars that run past 35th, 36th through 43rd. And that's probably $200,000 or $300,000 that he just probably not soon pay these guys that pull off early.
He doesn't believe any of these starting parkers sell any tickets for him, and then he's got to pay out the millions of dollars in purse at the back of the field, which he wouldn't do if they cut the field down to 36. That's where he's coming from because the promoter pays the purse. NASCAR's got a different interest. NASCAR doesn't pay the purse. They've got an interest to put as many cars out on the racetrack, sell more licenses, get more people into the pits than they can. They want to sell licenses, and they want to get as many entries into the show as possible because that's good for NASCAR, which is different than the promoter that has to sell the tickets and pay the purse. So NASCAR makes the final decision on this matter, and I'm going to tell you what, they're not going to change this policy.
Yeah.
So Bruton Smith, you're just going to have to live with it.
All right. Well, I believe that you are correct, Kirk. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Marty Smith from ESPN.com joins the Racing Boys here on Sports Radio 810.
Track Talk. Listening to Track Talk with the Racing Boys, brought to you by McCarthy Chevrolet in Olathe, or visit them online at McCarthyChevyKC.com.
Welcome back. It's Track Talk with the Racing Boys. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate it. Joining us now is a friend of the Racing Boys. You hear him on here from time to time. The best motorsports journalist in the business, in my opinion. Marty Smith joins us from ESPN. Marty, how you doing, my friend?
High praise. Thank you. Happy Saturday.
Thanks for the last minute jumping in here, man. We sure appreciate that. And I know it's been a busy week. Let me ask you, Marty, this week that you've had, how intense is that, and how much time do you spend on the media tour, and how many bits do you put out, and how many segments do you do for ESPN? It must be a little overwhelming for you a little bit.
It's a lot. There's a lot of stops, certainly. I am, this will be my 15th season covering the Cup Series. So, with that said, you kind of, when that's your life, you kind of have your finger on the pulse pretty well.
Right.
So, for those of us that do it every week and go race to race, we usually go in there with an agenda each day. And, for local affiliates who don't get access to these guys very often,
right,
it's great for them because they do get that face-to-face access with the drivers and with the owners and with the folks that make decisions for these respective teams. But for me, the way I approach it, I go into every day with a specific angle and I chase that angle. So I don't do every stop. I do the stops that I feel like can give me the best information for the story that I'm doing. And I took a very different approach this year than that which I've taken every other year. I decided I wanted to survey the business of the sport right now because we are sort of in this moment where the economy's been down and we have a new car coming in and teams are thrashing for sponsorship. There does seem to be an uptick, though, in my opinion. So I wanted to focus this week on the business of NASCAR, and I learned a lot. And there are still several stories that I haven't done yet that I gathered during the tour. I did one. The first story that I did was the business of being Tony Stewart.
Right.
And I learned so much about what Tony has going on a daily basis. And, you know, outside of worrying about driving, that's only one very small facet of his life. And, you know, he owns all three of those Sprint Cup teams with Gene Haas. There are myriad decisions that need to be made from that perspective. He owns all those World of Outlaws and USAC teams, and he owns a food company. He owns a PR and marketing firm.
Oh, by the way, a racetrack.
You know, on and on and on.
Right.
So I learned a lot there. I also, anyway, I did several business-related stories, and that was unique for me, and it was very educational for me. And so that was kind of my focus on the media tour. We did, you know, we learned some things. You know, Kyle Busch got the extension. That was confirmed. I sat Brad Keselowski down for an ESPN television interview on Wednesday evening. That was tremendous. And I pushed him really hard, guys, because it was his last thing of the day, and he wasn't giving me the answers that I felt like were inside him. So I got on him pretty good.
Wow.
And
I have not seen that bit.
Yeah, it hasn't aired yet.
When
it won't air until I should know this. I'm embarrassed I don't. I'm not sure what day exactly NASCAR Now starts.
Okay.
I think February 4th. What day is February 4th? Y'all got a calendar?
That'd be on a Monday.
That would be a Monday. Okay, I think it's February 4th is when NASCAR Now begins for the year.
Okay.
It will air during that week at some point. I do know that the bite was so strong. The last comment that he gave me, I basically looked at him. I threw my paper that I had in my hand with question notes on the floor. I'm like, dude, look, what's the story? You have this chip on your shoulder that you're not being forthcoming about. What is it? Where does it come from? And he's like, I said, you are at the top of the mountain.
Right.
You are the number one driver right now in the number one form of motorsport in the United States of America. He said, I don't look at it like that. I said, how can you not? You won the Sprint Cup Championship. There is no greater accomplishment for an American auto racer. There's not. Maybe winning the Indy 500. I don't know. I would say not, but my allegiance has fenders.
Well, I'm with you on that.
His answer was fantastic. I'll leave it at that. He finally gave me where that edge comes from, and it was really enlightening.
He needs that. He needs that edge, doesn't he?
Yeah, man. He's like
right.
It made me think of my best friend. My best friend's Eric Church, the country music singer.
Right.
And Eric is at the top of the mountain right now in country music. He's a standard, and you know he has to continually find that fuel. Because it's not unlike Brad. Where Brad came from, he was told you can't do it.
Right.
He was told you can't drive. He was told you'll never make it.
Depressed. Right.
And now they've both done it.
Right.
That was so long their fuel. And now they proved the world wrong. So where does that fuel come from now?
Interesting.
That's what I see.
Interesting. I don't know if you had a chance to see why NASCAR is the barometer of the economy by Dr. Justin Isaacs. It was a good read this week, and you were talking about the business. And would you find that to be a fair statement that NASCAR is the barometer to the economy and what's going on in America? Do you find that to be true?
I have not seen that piece, but it sounds very interesting. I'll look for it. I don't know that it's the barometer, but I think it definitely gives some insight into where corporate America is in its advertising strategy. Because if you look at who's doing what, this week I did another business piece that said why NASCAR for 5 Hour Energy.
Mm-hmm.
This is a company that is making money hand over fist, and they could be anywhere. They could play in any pond. They have expendable dollars to promote their product, but they love NASCAR racing, and I was intrigued by that. So I sat down with the vice president of sales for 5 Hour, and she was extremely she educated me on what NASCAR does for them and what Clint Boyer, y'all's hometown boy, does for them. And it was great. They tried the NFL. It didn't work the way NASCAR works. I asked her point blank, what did Clint Boyer's wild bull running of the bulls sprint through the Phoenix garage mean for 5 Hour Energy? And she laughed and said it's the absolute greatest commercial we could have ever dreamed of.
Wow.
They loved it.
Wow. Unbelievable.
And, you know, I do think that companies' engagement in NASCAR resonates to the larger scope. I do agree with that. Is it the barometer? You could say yes, you could say no. I would say there's a lot of merit to that argument.
You can check that out at speedwaymedia.com, by the way. It's a really interesting read, you know, talking about how the fans, it's not a hometown team. You have to travel. Dr. Justin Isaacs. So
okay,
it's,
I'll look in. Who do you interview for it?
It's an opinion piece, but it's got a lot of of statistics in it about the economy and how, you know, when NASCAR started to fall off a little bit and coincide with the way the economy is going. It's very interesting read. You've got to check it out. Kirk?
Is it safe to say in your research, Marty Smith, that ROI is a big term, return on investment? Now, years ago, corporate America could get involved in NASCAR and say, you know, I just want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. It's a great place to bring our customers, the hospitality and everything's good for us. But now are we in a part of the economy now trying to come out of a bad economy that when corporate America spends money for advertising dollars, they want return on investment? Is that the same here?
Well, any business is like that, right?
Well, I think that oddly enough, that's a totally plausible question. Here's what I've learned. I've learned that the strategies have changed quite a bit, and here's how. Used to be Lowe's, or let me think of a great example. Okay, here's a great example. Used to be, let's take Penske Racing. Miller Lite would throw their name on the hood, throw their brand on the hood, and let it ride. Mm-hmm. Now, there is so much business to business. That's the big thing now in the garage for the advertisement engagement. It is how can we bring Miller Lite probably isn't a good example. I just blew that. But anyway, companies will bring vendors to I guess 5 Hour would be a good one because I just did that story.
Right.
What they'll do is they'll take this race car and they'll go to Circle K, example A, okay? And they'll say, hey, for better shelf space and better signage, we'll give you the TV panel or the deck lid for this race. You can bring your folks out to the track. We'll give you a great experience, and then you get that B2B relationship.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's such an interesting culture to me.
Right.
And in case you guys don't know this stat,
about 2 minutes.
You know why Roger Penske and Penske Racing got Shell?
No.
Business to business.
Hmm. Oh, no doubt.
They have done. You can't compete with Penske trucking.
Right.
They'll do high 9 figures in gallons of gas bought at Shell gas stations. How can anybody compete with that?
Right.
It's a win for everybody involved.
Marty, we've only got
a new strategy.
Yeah, we've only got about 90 seconds till the top of the show, so I want to get a couple quick ones in. The big buzz, and is this really newsworthy? Do we dare talk about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Danica Patrick coming out?
What's the story? I mean, it's America.
Yeah, right. People are interested in it.
There's an insatiable desire for people's personal information, and this is very personal information.
Right.
Danica was forthcoming in it, and so it is an open book.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Okay, and one other thing, the buzz after the test at Charlotte, I know they've been dealing with weather. These cars, they've had them out on the track a little bit quickly. Can you tell us what the drivers think about the new Gen 6 car?
Quote Tony Stewart, if they race half as good as they drive by themselves, we're in for a great time.
Yeah. What did you see physically when you were looking at it? Because you have a trained eye of these cars out on the track. What did you see?
I think they look great.
Yeah.
I don't know how much different. It's all about the tire.
Yeah.
I don't know how much different they're going to drive from the COT, or race from the COT. But I think that there's so much. There was overwhelming optimism among the teams and drivers during the media tour and at testing. I hope that comes to fruition.
All right.
It's a great-looking car, that's for sure.
It is a good-looking car. All
Man,
right.
they look awesome. I mean, it's been since the late 80s that the cars looked this much like a production car. It's fantastic.
All right, Marty. Thanks for the last-minute request. We appreciate it, and we'll be talking to you down the road. Thanks so much, my friend.
All right, guys. Be good. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
Marty Smith, ESPN.com.
I can't wait for that
Nobody
Brad
does it better.
Keselowski interview.
Well, that's going to be great.
Wow.
When did he say NASCAR Now? The first day of NASCAR Now.
Right after the Super
February
Bowl.
4th?
February 4th, he said. So we'll look for that.
That'll be good. Don't forget, hour number 2 coming up on RacinBoys.com. We'll get into some local racing. We got a little bit of news about Lakeside Speedway. We'll take your phone calls. We will hope you join us. Hour number 2, again, exclusively on RacinBoys.com. Go to the homepage, click on media. There's a drop-down window. Click on live TV. That will take you to the in-studio cameras. And hour number 2, like hour number 1, is brought to you by McCarthy Chevrolet. For Jed, Todd, Kirk, I'm Scott. We'll see you next week here on Sports Radio 810 WHB.